Now we'll do betterDotsDemo. For betterDotsDemo, we'll start with DotsDemo, and we'll recall that in DotsDemo we create dots using this constructor, which creates a new instance of the dot class with these attributes, x, y, r, fill, and click count. We're going to modify this to use object-oriented programming in a slightly more sophisticated way. Instead of a dot just being a struct, we'll make a dot its own top-level class. And then we will also add methods to dots. And here's what I mean by methods. If I have a string, ABC, the length of the string is 3. And length is a function because length of 1, 2, 3, length of a list is also 3. So length is a top-level function that works over strings and works over lists. On the other hand, converting to uppercase is not a function. We don't call upper of s, but s.upper, which means it's a method. And the reason is if we had a list and we call the upper, what does it mean to take the uppercase of a list? Not clear at all. So you can't do it. When a function really only makes sense in the context of an instance of some class, we convert the function into a method and we put that code inside the class. And then we see that classes package both values or attributes, but also these methods or behaviors. So we're going to try to put a couple methods inside our dot class as well. So to begin with, we will go ahead and copy the code to our DotsDemo and go here and paste it and run it and just remind ourselves that this runs. That's great. Okay. So the first thing we have to do now is convert our dot class into a subclass of object, a top-level class. Object is the highest level class. Everything in Python is an object. When you create your own new class, you use subclass object. And the first thing we have to create is our constructor. So we'll define our constructor. This is the function that gets called. Of course, now it's a method. Now that it's inside the class, functions are called methods. This is the method that is called when you first construct a dot. It is the method that gets called right here. So let's copy that and place this up here. And this is our constructor. Now this is the call. Of course, it turns out it's going to take x, y, r, fill, and click count. Okay. X, y, r, fill, and click count. And now what we have to do inside here is we need to create our new result, which is, it turns out objects always need a struct. They need a place to store the values for the fields. So we still need a struct. And inside the struct, now we can place these values. And dot click count is click count. Great, okay. And then we go ahead and return the dot. So now the caller provides these values. We inside here create the struct, fill it out, return the struct, and now the caller can use that struct to go ahead and have dot click count and so forth. So far so good. It's just this, unfortunately, is not how Python works. It's close. First, Python actually creates the struct for you and passes it in as the first parameter. Cool. Second, because of that, you do not have to return the dot, the struct, because Python will also return it for you. So far, so good. The third thing is the name of your constructor has to actually not be the name of your class, but $init_. This is not to be confused with what we have been calling init, which is the top-level function in our animations. This $init__ is the method that is the constructor for this class. So when I call dot down here, I call dot to create an instance. This method is called. This method is called. Notice I do not down here provide the struct. The first parameter is not the dot. That is automatically created by Python, and the rest is what was provided. My constructor fills out all the fields. It does not return anything because Python will do the returning for us. Let's see if this works. Go ahead and run this and pull this down here, and it works. Okay, now the next thing is a convention, which is, I believe, very unfortunate. But it's a convention. Everyone does it, so you'll have to do it too. You don't call this dot. It makes perfect sense because that is a dot. It's just in most languages that would be called this, and in Python the convention is called self. So everywhere I have dot here, we have to call self. This is not required. After all, it just ran calling it dot, but it is required because everyone and their cousin will expect you to use self as the first parameter in a Python method. And what it means is that's the struct that holds on to the fields or attributes for that instance. So we're going to go ahead and run this. I didn't really change anything except the name, and it still works. Excellent. So now the next thing we want to do is show you that you can actually you can construct you can initialize some of these attributes inside your constructor and not just have the values passed in. And for that, what we'll do is this. We will only specify the x and y, not the radius, fill, and click count. And so now, notice when I call dot, and we won't name it either. We'll just go ahead and we'll pass in an x and a y and nothing else when I create a dot. So up here, this has to take self, that is the struct that Python created for us, and then x and y. We're going to have to take care of r, fill, and click count ourselves. Click count is easy. That was 0. R, if we recall, I actually copied these for us. R was random to 2050, so we'll put that there. And fill is this random choice of some nice colors. So we'll go ahead and put that here as well. Right there. Boop. Maybe put a return right there so this reads a little better. So now, when you call the constructor, you only pass in x and y. Here we are calling the constructor right here, and we're only passing in the x, y of the click, which actually seems pretty sensible. And then we, inside the constructor, initialize the radius, the fill, and click count. And we run this, and we see that indeed it still runs. Excellent. So this is a good time to stop, but we're going to continue because in addition to the constructor, there's other methods we could put in there. For instance, telling if a dot contains a point feels very much like something that it's like upper to strings. Upper is something that makes sense for strings, but only for strings. So telling if a dot contains a point feels like something that belongs inside the dot class as a method, and that's where we're going to put it. There it is, inside there. So now we have to make a couple changes, but not many. First change is there's no reason to say dot contains point. Actually, tell you what, let's leave that for a minute. You'll see why. The dot is the instance. If you recall, we have to call that self now, only as a naming convention. Now when we call this down here, dot contains point is no longer a function. It's a method. So dot, that's how you call methods on the dot, right? You'd call S is ABC, S dot upper. That's a method upper called on that instance. Dot, and that's why you don't need this dot contains point. We know it's a dot at this point, so you get rid of that and just say contains point. So we go here and call this contains point. And does that work? Survey says. It does not because dot is not defined on line 20. Let's look at line 20. Well, when we modified the self, we left that one off. Let's do this one more time. And when I click in the circle, it works. Click just outside the circle, I get a new one. Outside, new one. So this works. Excellent. Is there anything else in our code that really belongs inside our dot class? And I'd say, well, let's see. Init is really an animation thing. Mouse pressed is an animation thing. Redraw all. Well, what's interesting here is you might claim that this code right here is simply how you draw a dot. A dot should know how to draw itself. I agree. So let's go ahead and say dot, draw, and it'll go ahead and what does it need to know? It needs to know the canvas. And then we'll take this code and we're going to turn it into def draw canvas, but it's going to be a method inside the dot class. So draw of dot comma canvas, because methods take the dot first. I'm going to move this into, I moved it into the dot class. So here it is, the draw method. Now, Here it takes a dot, and let's watch this first. Let's watch it work. For each dot, tell the dot to draw itself. And is this going to work? The answer is yes, it is. And now the unfortunate change that the dot has to be called self, which again I really don't like, but no one's really asked me. That's just how it is. You have to call it self everywhere where we have dot. Could have used replace probably, find replace. But there we go. So now when I run this, go here, great, works. So now notice again, when I call redraw all, which is a top level function, for each dot, I call the draw method on that dot. Notice here, I'm not providing the dot as a first parameter, just canvas. And yet, inside the method, there is the dot, which out here is called dot draw. Inside here, it becomes the self, which is, again, a struct that contains x, y, r, fill, click count, the attributes that define this particular instance. And so now we have it, a dot class, which is a top level class. It has a constructor. It has two additional methods. One method will tell you whether or not the dot contains a point, and another method knows how to draw that particular dot. And this is getting closer to a more mature use of object-oriented programming. Still a beginning, we have lots more to go, but a very nice start.